My neighbor Walter hasn't had what most people would call a job in almost 15 years, yet he just bought a lake house, drives a truck that costs more than my first apartment, and somehow never seems stressed about money the way the rest of us are. I used to assume he had some secret inheritance or a lucky lottery ticket tucked away. But the truth turned out to be far more interesting and honestly a little unsettling once I understood it. My name is Daniel, and I spend an unreasonable amount of time trying to figure out why some people's money seems to work completely differently than everyone else's. And Walter's situation ended up leading me down a rabbit hole that changed how I look at wealth entirely. Here's the thing that took me embarrassingly long to notice about people like Walter. They almost never sell anything. Not their stocks, not their business shares, not the land they bought decades ago. And at first, that seemed strange to me, because isn't the whole point of investing to eventually cash out and enjoy the money? But the more I paid attention, the more I realized that selling is actually the last thing wealthy people want to do, because selling is the one action that triggers a tax bill. So instead of selling, they figured out a completely different way to turn their wealth into spendable cash, and it's a method so quiet and so legal that most working Americans have never even heard of it. The pattern has three parts to it, and once you see the sequence, you start noticing it everywhere among people who seem to have money without ever appearing to cash out. The first part is that they buy assets designed to grow quietly rather than pay them income. Think about the difference between a rental property that spits out a monthly check versus a piece of undeveloped land that just sits there appreciating in silence, or a stock that never issues a dividend but slowly climbs in value year after year. The IRS can't tax something that hasn't happened yet, and an asset that just sits there getting more valuable technically hasn't happened in the eyes of the tax code. It's a strange quirk of how our system works, but it means a fortune can double or triple in value and on paper generate zero taxable income the entire time. That's step one, and it's the part most people actually understand intuitively, even if they've never articulated it. It's step two where things start to feel almost unfair. Because eventually, even wealthy people need actual cash to live on. You can't hand a car dealership a stock certificate. So how does Walter buy a truck without selling a single share of whatever he owns? He borrows against it. Banks have entire departments built around lending money to people with large investment portfolios, using those portfolios as collateral, the same way your house serves as collateral for a mortgage. And here's the detail that made my stomach turn a little when I first learned it. Borrowed money isn't income, which means it isn't taxed, not $1. You could borrow $2 million tomorrow against a stock portfolio, and the IRS would have absolutely nothing to say about it, because legally, a loan isn't earnings, it's just debt. Let me put some real numbers on this so it stops sounding abstract, because the math is where this whole thing gets genuinely wild. Picture someone named Renee, who spent a decade building up a $700,000 stock portfolio, mostly in growth companies that rarely pay dividends. If that portfolio grows at a steady 9% a year, which isn't some fantasy return, just a reasonably good decade in the market, after 10 years, that $700,000 becomes roughly $1.65 million. If Renee sold it all today to buy a house, she'd owe capital gains tax on almost the entire $950,000 in growth, and depending on her state, that tax bill could easily eat $200,000 or more. So instead, she doesn't sell. She walks into a private banking office and borrows 60% of her portfolio's value, which comes out to just under $1 million at an interest rate around 5.5%. That's roughly $54,000 a year in interest. Meanwhile, her portfolio, still fully intact and still growing at 9%, is earning her close to $148,000 a year. She's living on borrowed money, paying interest that's smaller than what her portfolio earns, and she owes the government none of it, because on paper, nothing was sold and nothing was earned.
If you're feeling a slow building sense of unfairness right now, I get it, because I felt the exact same thing the first time I really sat with these numbers. But it gets even stranger when you follow the story further, because there's an obvious question hanging over all of this. What happens when the loan eventually needs to be dealt with? What happens when Renee, or someone like Walter, eventually passes away with all that debt still outstanding? This is where the third part of the pattern comes in, and it's the part that genuinely surprised me, because it's not some shady offshore trick, it's just sitting there right in ordinary tax law that's existed for decades. When Renee dies, her children don't inherit her original cost basis, meaning they don't inherit the tax bill tied to how much she originally paid for those shares. Instead, they inherit the assets at their current value, as if the entire history of growth simply never happened for tax purposes. So if that portfolio has grown to $4 or $5 million by the time she passes away decades later, her kids can sell enough of it to pay off all the outstanding loans, and they won't owe a single cent in capital gains tax on any of that growth. The debt gets wiped clean, the family keeps the rest, and the government, despite decades of that money growing and being spent along the way, collects essentially nothing. And this is exactly what silently stopped me in my tracks, because it means the entire lifetime of spending, borrowing, growing, and passing wealth can happen almost completely outside the tax system that the rest of us live inside every single day. Meanwhile, if you or I earn a salary, we're taxed the moment it hits our paycheck, taxed again if we spend it, taxed again if we manage to save and invest it and eventually sell it. We're taxed at every single checkpoint, while this three-step pattern lets someone's money move through an entire lifetime almost tax-free, simply by never selling, always borrowing, and eventually dying with the debt intact. It's not a loophole in the sense of some clever accountant finding a crack in the wall. It's baked directly into how the system was built, and I think that's actually the more uncomfortable realization. If you're finding this as strange and clarifying as I did, this is the exact kind of pattern I like digging into on this channel. So if you haven't already, hitting subscribe means you won't miss the next time I pull one of these threads apart. What really gets me thinking, though, isn't just the mechanics of the strategy itself. It's what it reveals about how differently wealth behaves once it crosses a certain threshold. Below that threshold, money is something you earn and spend and slowly, carefully save. Above it, money becomes something you never actually touch directly at all. It just sits there generating collateral, generating borrowing power, generating options, while the person attached to it lives comfortably off debt that technically doesn't exist as taxable anything. It's almost like there are two entirely separate financial universes operating side by side, using the exact same dollar signs but completely different rules. And most of us have only ever lived in one of them without realizing the other one existed. I don't think Walter sat down one day and mapped this whole strategy out with a spreadsheet. I think what actually happens is that once you have enough assets, a good financial advisor or private banker simply walks you through this path naturally because it's the obvious, boring, standard way wealthy people are advised to operate. It's not treated as some aggressive tax dodge in those rooms. It's treated as basic financial hygiene, the same way the rest of us are told to build an emergency fund or avoid credit card debt. That contrast is what sticks with me the most. The idea that what feels like an outrageous secret to us is just Tuesday for someone with the right kind of banker. Before you go, if any part of this changed how you think about wealth, debt, or taxes, go ahead and subscribe so you catch the next one of these breakdowns when it comes out. So here's what I keep coming back to after learning all this. We're taught our whole lives that debt is dangerous and selling your investments is how you win at money, when for people operating at a certain level, it's almost the exact opposite. Debt is the tool that keeps the game going, and selling is the one move you're desperately trying to avoid. It makes me wonder how much of what we consider normal financial wisdom was really only ever designed for people who don't have enough assets to play this other game in the first place. So I'll leave you with this question, and I genuinely love to hear your take in the comments. If borrowing against wealth can replace earning and selling entirely, do you think that's a flaw in the system, or is it simply what any of us would do if we had the assets to make it work?